work session of the Rutherford County Board of Education. We're now going to have the Pledge of Allegiance from Ms. Tammy Sharp.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd now like to have the moment of silence. I want to remind you all that this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I want you to all keep in mind those people who are battling cancer, as well as their friends and family and caregivers. Moment of silence. Thank you. Let's take a look at the agenda. Is there anyone that has any questions about the agenda? There are no questions. We will look at the consent agenda. Do we have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? There are none. We will go to number 6.
We'll do that Thursday.
And we'll do this Thursday, okay? Number 7,
Thursday.
we don't have any visitors, but we do have guest speaker, right?
We have several. So we're
Okay.
going to do, at our board work session today, Perry Weather presentation by Cade Clayton. So Perry Weather is a weather monitoring and alert system that can help with all outdoor weather activities like sports, recess, snow days, school arrival, and departure. And I will turn it over to you. And know that we have no background at all, so
Absolutely.
please.
Well, thank you all for having me out here to speak. As a native Middle Tennessean, always love to work with districts close to home. So really appreciate you guys having me out. And so yeah, I'm gonna try to give you guys a little bit of background on what we do, a little bit about who we are, how I think we can really help out the district. But beyond that, I'm gonna try not to bore you all to death, which can be easy to do because we are talking about the weather. So I'm gonna try to give you guys some background. But so Perry Weather, to kind of summarize and try to put this into a couple sentences, our goal is to create a platform and provide you with a platform that essentially brings everybody in the district under one roof when it comes to dealing with the weather across multiple departments, make sure that everybody has the very best and the same data so that when we're making decisions, everybody's on the same page. And then beyond that, we really want to take the onus of making these decisions about the weather off of your administrators, your coaches, your staff, and put it on us. After all, we are in the weather business, and as great of a job as I'm sure that your coaches, your staff, your administrators do in dealing with the weather, I'm sure most of them, when they signed up for these roles, did not expect to moonlight as meteorologists day in and day out, but that's exactly what they're called to do. And so we want to take some of that back off their plate and provide them something that is going to put all the resources that they need to make those decisions in one place, but also, automate processes around the weather, automate communication about the weather, remove some of that human element, and hopefully make sure that the district is always ready to deal with weather threats, deal with safety threats, and communicate that out effectively. So firstly, I just wanted to kind of provide some visuals. I'm definitely a visual learner myself, and so typically pictures kind of help me get the point across. So I actually just took a screenshot of our computer dashboard from our software system, and just kind of annotated a couple points I wanted to touch on. So this is the web-based version. We also have a mobile app. So this is going to be able to go with your coaches and your administrators wherever they go. And so kind of just breaking it down, in our app, we're going to be able to show, so current conditions, so we're tracking everything from temperature to rainfall to wind speed, even some advanced metrics like wet bulb globe temperature, something that is at the forefront of keeping student athletes safe from heat, especially during the summer months. In the South, Tennessee is certainly modernizing our standards. We are a touch behind maybe some of our other southern cousins in the fact that they have all adopted wet bulb globe temperature as the only standard for which athletics can practice and compete under. You have to be monitoring that. We are slowly getting there. We are certainly going to very soon, and so we would love to help you guys get out in front of that. But we're monitoring all of those conditions with weather stations that we plan to put all over the district, specifically at high schools and middle schools where we're going to have a lot of athletics going on. And so those weather stations are going to allow us to monitor those conditions, and more than monitor those. So we want to work with the district to set policies for each of these different metrics. And so with those policies, when those are violated or broken, we want your staff, your administrators to receive alerts that not only tell them what policy was broken and what that metric was, but also what steps they need to take. So for heat, again, for example, we want to make sure that when it's too hot to practice outside, they're not just getting a text that says, the heat index is 104, because it's tough to know what to do with that. And so we want to make sure that they get a text that says the heat index is over 104, we need to limit practice to 1 hour, and we need to add water breaks. Or if we can't run buses when wind speeds get over 30 miles an hour, we want to make sure that your director of transportation is getting a text message whenever any weather station in the district picks that up. And so beyond that too, obviously real-time alerts are great, but we want to help you guys be as proactive as possible. And so for each of those policies, we're also going to be looking at the forecast and highlighting any of those potential policy breaches that might be upcoming over the next couple of days. So if you guys can see on here, there's a big red box that says high chance of precip over 1/4 inch. And so that's going to look at the forecast, show you guys what is likely to happen, make sure that everybody's well aware before any of these weather events happen. Also, we're tracking lightning, everything like that. And then moving forward, so this was the mobile app. As stated, all of this is going to travel with you, be available to you wherever you go. All the same functionality. You're going to get those text messages. You're going to be able to see the radar. You're also going to be able to, if you'll move me up a slide, you're also going to be able to interact with meteorologists 24 hours a day. So, at a district level, I think this is one of our biggest offerings is, in addition to this platform that is automatically alerting your staff, we want to make sure that you guys also still have the human factor and can communicate with our meteorologists for school closures, for forecasting for the district, for athletics, all of that stuff put into one place, and then, obviously be able to receive professional help. And then the last thing that I kind of wanted to highlight is our widget. And so for school districts, this is something where we fully understand that maybe not everybody needs to know everything all the time, but we also understand that people need information, they need to feel included, they need to feel in the loop. And so this is something that you guys can customize how much information we're showing, but we can put it on your websites, we can make it accessible from QR codes and communicate with parents, visiting coaches, everything like that, have them also be on the same page as your coaches, so that when we are talking about canceling school, canceling games, stuff like that, once again, there's parity of information, everybody's on the same page, and that's all communicated. And then finally, one last thing I'll touch on. So in addition to dealing with the weather, one area that we identified that we thought we could really help with is not just weather safety, but generally school safety. And so in our platform, we've built 2 features that I wanted to highlight that really help with that. So the first is a way to message people on the system district-wide in just 2 clicks. So we call it our mass notify feature, but essentially you can select an individual user, you can select predetermined groups of users, so it could be broken down by by school, by transportation versus athletics, however we want to divide this out, and send both pre-saved and custom messages. The hope is that we're not wading through a bunch of group texts and trying to make sure that we include all the right people is done for you. We can get information out really quickly. It doesn't have to be weather related, obviously. We view this as something that people can use for something as simple as reminding people that we've got a meeting on Monday morning to in emergency situations, getting information out really quickly. And then the final point that I'll touch on, and I had a video for this. I don't know if the audio will cooperate, but or if it's going to be extremely loud. So there's no audio for the first part, but so we have hardware that we can deploy in the field. Like I mentioned, we are deploying weather stations, but we're also going to be able to deploy sirens. And so these sirens, in addition to, I'll let the video do
This message is a test.
Did I do what I was supposed to do?
This message is a test.
So, as you can see, in addition to being an automated siren system that automatically is going to go off anytime there's lightning within 10 miles of campus, now we can turn on off timers and set that by day of the week so that you guys don't get any angry calls from neighbors in the area. But it's also a fully functional PA system that administrators can access from their phone or their computer anywhere. If you're in the district office, you can select multiple campuses and essentially send out any message extremely quickly through an external PA system. And so what we identified was most of our partner schools had internal PA, but very few had any kind of external PA. And so in any kind of a lockdown situation or something like that, it's equally as important that we can keep people from coming back into buildings. If we have games where we need parents and fans to leave and we don't have an announcer, there's really no way to accomplish that. And so our solution was this. That can be accessed through the app, like I said, and you can do one unit. We could do every unit in the district. And so it gives us really a wide reach of how we deploy our hardware and how functional that is. So outside of that is pretty much all the information I had. I will say, so we currently work with Williamson County Schools, and they have very graciously offered access to all of their weather stations in the district if you guys do decide to partner with us. So we would be able to set up a pretty significant network of weather stations that would not only kind of give you guys some early warning coming from that way, but also anywhere that you travel, the ability to pull from our weather stations, because without that, any weather source that you're pulling from is probably pulling from Nashville International, and that data is really only updating about once an hour. So it's not particularly site-specific, not particularly real-time, and so our station's obviously on-site and updating every 5 minutes, so you guys would have a huge network of information, and hopefully that would make a lot of decisions significantly easier. But yeah, appreciate y'all putting up with that spiel. Hope that was enough background, but yeah, would love to field some questions and hear from you guys.
Do you have any questions?
I have a question. So this weather station and this outdoor warning system, it goes together?
So they can both, we can deploy just a weather station or just sirens, but we also have the option to combine them. And essentially it's a siren unit and outdoor warning system with a weather station sitting on top of it in one location.
Okay, and then, so we have like 48 physical schools, right? That's correct, 48 physical schools? 50. Plus the central office. Mm-hmm. How many of these weather stations we will need to kind of adequately serve the whole entire county?
Yeah, absolutely. So initial conversations, we had talked about maybe 16 to cover all the high schools and maybe a couple standalone middle schools. Once again, the weather stations obviously have broad implications, but the necessity for them to be on site really only extends to athletics and specifically wet bulb globe temperature. And so we want to make sure that we have them on site there, but anywhere in the district, you're going to be pulling from the closest weather station to you. So even elementary schools that maybe won't have one on site, if there's a middle school or it's a school cluster or there's a middle school down the road, they'll pull from that and they'll still have very good information. And then lightning-wise, all of that lightning data is going to be based on your GPS location. So regardless of how many weather stations we have in the district, that's going to be using your specific location based on your phone.
Mr. Tidwell?
If we did 16 weather stations, what is the cost? Is it an annual thing? Is it a recurring thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is an annual cost. And the benefit of that for us is that we can kind of offer what we think is more value to you guys in the fact that since you guys, It's a subscription, so the software, the hardware is also on subscription, but that means that we can offer a warranty on all the parts on our units for the life of our deal. If it's 2 years or 20 years, we're going to make sure that if anything breaks, it's taken care of. And the other thing too, so in terms of cost, for 16 weather stations, I think we had it quoted out at somewhere in the range of, I think it was around $35,000 a year, and that includes all of the software as well. That included 90 full users for the district, so people that can log into the app on their phone and their computer. And then it also included what we call notification-only users, which are people that can't log into the app but will get text messages for all of the policies based on their location. So it included 400 of those and then 90 full users. And yes, I think it was very, very close to about $35,000 a year.
All right, and you said 400 notification users?
Yes.
Okay. So we couldn't set this up if we decided to move forward with this. We couldn't set this up to where in like a set area, those people get the notification.
So they would be pre-added users. It wouldn't be kind of GPS based. They would be preset users, and typically, that's done to make sure that, everybody that needs notification is getting notification. And the good news there too is, we understand that adding 400 users is a lot of legwork for the district, and so you guys would have a dedicated account manager who would not only help you guys set policy, but also add all these users, organize them in a way that makes sense, however you guys determine that to be. That's by school, by department, whatever that looks like, we'll take care of all that legwork.
How long have you had that relationship with Williamson County?
So in terms of officially them signing on paper, they signed at the start of August, but it's a discussion that we have had for almost 2 years at this point. We had some very initial conversations 2 years ago, and then last year we kind of dove in, and it's an interesting kind of scale in the fact that the county also has some access. So there was a lot of moving pieces, a lot of people to coordinate and get on the same page. But at the end of the day, they are, so Franklin Special School District also came on board, and so pretty much anybody in education over there is using Perryweather, has access to our system, has hardware on site, so we're extremely happy with the way that partnership turned out.
Ms. Sharp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First question is ramp-up time. How long
Yeah.
does it take from the time we purchase it to get it in use?
Absolutely. So the day that we kind of get paperwork signed, you guys will have access to the software. We'll go ahead and start adding those users for you. We'll also set up training calls. For 400 people, it may be 20, and that's fine with us. We're going to get everybody in, make sure that they're set up and that they know how to use the system and get the most out of it, make sure that your widgets are on your website, everything like that. And so then from a hardware perspective, typically, I would say our lead time for moving like 16 units out somewhere is probably in the 5-ish week range. Conservatively, I'll say 6 weeks. Typically, that 4 to 6 week is a pretty sweet spot for us. So, especially compared to, obviously, 4 to 6 weeks is not quick, but compared to most of our competitors, I mean, we're talking about a time savings of several months in a lot of cases. So we are pretty proud of the 4 to 6 weeks, but it's definitely something that you guys would receive priority for kind of a deal this size, and especially because I would push extra hard because you are Tennesseans. So
My second question is, has there been any issues interfacing with other systems that those districts currently have? Have they had to buy anything else to accompany that?
yeah, so the good news is we are fairly self-contained in most aspects. So all of our units are completely wireless. They run on a cellular network and they're solar powered. And so the benefit of that is we don't have any kind of IT concerns. We also, from an infrastructure perspective, we don't have to have you guys run us power. We can put these almost anywhere. And then from a software side of things, we're kind of the opposite. We have a client API as well as we are very open API capable. And so we can embed in a lot of things. The widget also gives us quite a bit of flexibility. It's just, a simple line of HTML code, so we can embed that in almost any existing, website, app, anything like that.
So it's seamless.
That's the goal, absolutely.
So, Dr. Sullivan, my last question, if I may, ask Patty and Mr. Evans, will this system take some load off of your plates? Is there something that this system, okay. Because I know the system that you have, Mr. Evans, when you send out messages or something like that, there's a ramp-up time that you have to do all that.
This won't replace our need to still notify parents. We'll still need to give them instructions on what the plans are for the day. What it would potentially do, and I would need to evaluate this further, is it gives us another data source when we're trying to make the decision with Dr. Sullivan about whether we need to close a school or schools because of weather. As much data as we can get in those situations, the better. We would have to evaluate. I'd like to talk to Williamson County Schools to see how well it's working for them and do some more evaluation.
Thank you. I think that's my last question. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Mr. Tidwell?
Who currently, Dr. Sullivan, who currently is making the decision at the football games? Is it the principal? Is it the coaches?
Athletic director and then the principal. But ultimately, we are watching those and giving them guidance, and we try to watch it as well. I don't love that system because it can be open for interpretation. I also don't love there are a lot of times a lightning strikes within an 8-mile radius, and we don't necessarily know about it. And so that'll be a change for our community to get into it, because I rightfully so for safety, but I anticipate the board and all of us getting emails, "It's sunny outside, why did you just play my game?" But for safety reasons. Go ahead, and then I've got a couple.
And do we currently have any policy in order for a lightning strike within a 10-mile radius, 15-mile radius?
We follow TSSAA standards, whatever their current radius is. I believe it's 8.
My last question is,
I was 8.
how accurate is the system at predicting Tennessee snowfall? No, I'm just kidding. If it could do that,
Didn't
sold.
you check your wa-
Ask Snowbird. Snowbird will tell you.
Yes.
Our largest competitor currently is probably a company called Thorgard. Thorgard was founded in the early 80s, and because of that time advantage, we started in 2010. And so for about 30 years, Thorgard really was the only option to have anything out there that did lightning. There was a siren that went off for lightning. Now they have a different philosophy where they claim to be able to predict lightning, but that has certainly led to some problems that we have heard firsthand. And I would say probably 50% of our clients have come from Thorgard. They still have a very large client base in the U.S., mainly Florida, and then the Illinois and Chicago area is kind of their two main hubs. But yeah, they're certainly, by numbers, our largest competitor.
Probably not, because it would have to be expended by June 30th. And so it wouldn't be able to cover, this PO would cover an entire year, so we wouldn't be able to cover that.
Okay. And Dr. Sullivan, you had a couple of things you wanted to add?
Yeah, so you brought up that one, we would, because it is over $24,999, it would have to go to bid process for us to be able to use that program. The other part of that is, you'd mentioned a competitor, so you guys are not single source, so it would have to go through bid, correct?
So the part that makes us sole source is we're the only ones that have the ability to monitor wet bulb globe temperature with an actual sensor on site, which, obviously there are other people that do some lightning detection. There's not many that have software and hardware. It's kind of an either or thing. So between those two, we certainly have had success, and we have a sole source letter. And so we've had success with that in the past.
Okay. And then you had meteorologist as kind of standby, just because I'm a meteorology nerd and wanted to be. Is it a certified meteorologist, somebody just a degree in meteorology? What is it?
It is certified meteorologists. We have 5 of them, and they are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No joke, these guys have a room that they are tracking every single storm cell in America. Yeah, you would love it. I try to stay away and not bother them because it looks very important. But
Great.
Anyone else?
we can try.
Need some rain. Yeah, we're real dry.
So, I have a question. So 16 of these weather stations will be enough to cover the whole school to determine decisions?
Yeah, because we're looking for one, I mean, honestly, we just need one site, just like somebody would go outside right now with one of our temperature gauges to see what's the heat index, and wherever they are, that would determine our heat index.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you so much. We
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it.
so much.
We good?
All right, so next we have Chris McIntyre and Carrie Young available remotely we talk about CMTA. So to give you a little bit of information, we've talked about CMTA for several years, continuing that conversation. And so this is a group who have different kind of experiences and backgrounds, who have been successful and have some success stories in using CMTA. And so they've requested to kind of talk, and if we have questions for them, I know I've got one around as far as rebates and federal funding and that kind of thing, but really just wanted to hear their perspective about how it's been successful, how it's helped change their district. We all realize that we've got to do some things, whether it's through CMTA or asking the county commission for money. Regardless, we have to do something to address some of these concerns. And so we hear, oh, behind us. Okay, yes.
So, Chris?
Yes, please, you can introduce him,
Chris
please.
McIntyre's on the left. He's with Warren County Schools. He has a dual job, CFO, construction trade lead, so he does both the money. And then on your left is Kerry Young. He was a 17-year board member. He's now with CBS Architecture. Did I get that right, y'all? But that's Kerry Young on the left.
So would you guys mind just sharing kind of a history of how you used it, how CMTA has been successful, and what your overall kind of thoughts and processes have been?
Can we hear him?
No, we cannot.
We can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. He's calling from his phone. That works. I don't think we're going to be able to hear them. I've got an idea to where they could call my phone and I could do it through if we wanted to move on to the next one, and I'll go set that up.
Okay.
Oh, I need to read that one though.
Yeah, you do.
What are you going to say?
Oh, I was going to just tell him, bear with us.
Yes, if
We're
you'll,
working on
yes.
something. We're working on something.
If you guys can, are they still there? Can I hear us? We're going to try to come back at 6:20 if that's okay. Get me through these next couple items, then I'll try to come back at 6:20 and find a way to connect. Okay. They good with that? Okay.
Number 9.
All right, number 9, so Human Resources, Tab 2, Memorandum of Understanding with Professional Educators, Board of Education Management Team, Professional Educators of Rutherford County, represented by the Rutherford County Education Association, in a collaborative process, has reached agreement as presented in the Memorandum of Understanding. This began Dr. Anthony, was September of last year? It was September or October of last year.
That's right.
So it's all outlined in Tennessee Code annotated. Teachers first have to choose whether or not they want to go into collaborative conferencing, then they have to meet a certain threshold, then they have to go to choose which group they want to be represented by. We've gone through multiple rounds of negotiations, and I appreciate there were some concerns we talked about previously at our board meetings, and I've met with their leadership team multiple times, and they've agreed, and we've all come to an agreement. So some of the sticking points were looking at ways to pay for subs, and when a teacher is not able to cover the classroom, and that's an area that we're going to continue to look at, but we don't have there's not a way for us to do that right now. There's not a mechanism. So our agreement was to come back and track it for a year to see truly how big of an issue is this, how big of an impact would it be, because right now the team is really represented very heavily on the high school level. But we're just not a district of high school teachers, we're a district of K-12 teachers. And so wanted to look at that. And then second aspect was really looking at making sure that we were fair in duties after school. Teachers are contracted. They're contracted for 7.5 hours. It's a little bit different because they're salaried, but they're contracted for a specific number of hours, but then they also have extra duties. And so just trying to make sure we were all being fair, and if there are any grievances, that a teacher could report that to me and then to investigate. So a lot of those other things are just putting in writing what we already do. So for example, looking at the in-service days, professional development days, truly outlining how many hours they are. They're already paid for them, making sure that everybody got lunch, what they would anyways, but just kind of putting those in place. Dr. Anthony, anything that I'm missing?
No, they also just review policies such as our sick policy and leave policies and procedures for grievances.
Yep, and they get a seat on the director's advisory group, which will start back now that we're in the second quarter. We'll start that back in November, and so that's just one of the things that they sit on, at least one person.
We have questions, concerns?
Ms. Schiller, I have a question. The 25 minutes for lunch, how is that computed? Because they're talking about, it's supposed to be including when they have to take the kids there and then coming back. So how is that 25 period there taking account into that?
Yes, so teacher lunchtime has to match whatever students get. And so we're not accounting for the amount of time, and it's specific in the law. It's not allowed to account the time it takes for them to come or go. Now, to say, are there days that a teacher may, with our big schools, may walking a classroom down, especially your elementary and middle level, may get there a minute or two late, and can we back up the rest of the lunch times a minute or two late? We can't. And so they may only get 23 minutes that day. Especially at the beginning of the school year, that's something we struggle with because kids getting used to their lunch numbers, all those different types of things. But they're required by law to have a duty-free lunch equal to what the students are.
I was just wondering how that was.
Good question.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
so if we're already doing all the things listed, because I was looking through here, I read through all this, and I'm looking at the communications, visitation, the class size, the storage space, staff area, communication system, telephone, secure space, all those things. If we're already doing all these things, then what is the purpose of this?
To me or to anybody?
That's open?
Yeah, I can answer it. So to me, it's because it's prescribed and allowed in state law. So that is the reason we go through the process, is it allows districts to go through that.
Yes, it just confirms that we will continue that obligation and that it will be on the forefront of our conversations. Always will be revisited.
It also gives them the option to reopen for discussions if they meet that threshold. So if they didn't in a year like insurance, then the insurance they're allowed to bring back open for discussion.
Anyone else? Thank you. Number 10, zoning update.
All right, a zoning update. So we had our principals last Wednesday, met with Rob for about an hour and kind of went through just a scenario. Probably could have given it more time in retrospect, thought an hour was good, but we had some very rich conversations. And so overall, kind of the same areas we've talked about, the downtown area, Blackman and Stewart's Creek were the main issues that were kind of discussed. So principals as a zoning group, we organized them into basically what their zoned areas were, and they had to come up with a consensus of what was a positive or what were pros, what were cons for each one of the concepts, offer suggestions. They turned those in, and we gave those to RSP, and then they also had feedback they could provide individually, and that was due last Friday. And so we meet with RSP Thursday, does that sound right, Dr. Martin? Everybody, Thursday at 1 to see new ideas, new concepts, so that we can hopefully have this as part of our discussion later this week. So that is the plan, to be able to have that. and still moving on track to have hopefully new concept maps, and then be able to discuss it November 7th and 9th again. And then we have a special called board meeting on November 14th. But if the board wants to make any motions or change dates or anything, of course, that is the board's purview to do that.
When are concept maps supposed to be ready?
I hope to have them this week.
This week? Oh, okay. Anyone else? Mr. Tidwell?
You said Thursday at 1, so will we have access to see those concept maps?
Yeah, as soon as I get them, I will send them. Yep. I'm hoping to be able to go over them Friday,
Okay.
so hopefully.
That'll be good.
Depends on what happens. So we have that meeting Thursday, and if on Thursday that there are a lot of conversations that we as a district leadership team don't feel comfortable, we need them to go back and look at, we may just have some of like their, I hate to say round 2.0, but round 2.0, and we still may request some other changes of them. That meeting is really for them to give us ideas of what the feedback stated.
Ms. Darby?
Do you know if we were ever able to get the overlay that I had asked about?
We have not yet, and the main thing that I'm working with is to try to figure out a way to enter addresses. The overlay should be an easier thing to be able to do, and quite frankly, that's something we should be able to do very quickly. The addresses, I don't, from a logistics standpoint, think there's a way to do that without us knowing truly which concept is being done, because we have to load each address through our GIS system into it to be able to connect.
Yeah, I just wanted to be able to.
Yep, I can do the
see
overlay.
that overlay of the old district with the new,
Once we,
really get a really
yes.
clear physical picture.
Yep. My hesitation is if we have maps Thursday, I'm not sure I'll get it done by Friday, but I'm going to try.
Okay.
How many concepts are we going to be getting?
I hope just two.
Just two?
I hope just modifications to two.
Are we going to get the originals, or we're not going, just the modifications from the two from here on out?
Hopefully, yes.
Okay, so we're moving beyond the originals at this point.
Yeah, that's what, the originals are going to be the largest, broadest scope of everything, but any feedback and comments that were made, that's where they're going to look to try to make any suggestions to.
So our vote is going to be based on the modifications that they provided.
Yeah, but as a board, you guys can always go back and move anything that you want to move.
Gotcha, okay. I just wanted clarity on what we were going to, the expectation of what was going to be delivered.
Yep.
Yes.
Hopefully, as long as we have that conversation and all feel comfortable without more changes.
When will it be up on the website? When will our families, our students get to see?
As soon as we discuss it, like as soon as we get it released,
We, the internal office, or we, the board?
both, because we'll do it all at the same time.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Ms. Sharp?
Oh, no, I was,
Ms. Darby?
Something to think about, and I don't know if it's something that would be better discussed on Friday, but being that we know where the new elementary and middle will be, it might be wise to push the high school off a little bit, being that we're discussing tonight land for a potential new high school. Just something the board might want to consider is maybe looking at those and maybe pushing out high school to a little bit of a later date.
Could you repeat that? I just want to make sure I understood what you said.
So when we're talking about, we've talked about like the deadlines and when all of these things are going to take effect and looking at rezoning and all of that kind of stuff, but knowing that we'll be having a new high school coming online, but we're not exactly sure where it will be, it might be wise to focus more on the elementary and middle right now and push the final option on the high school zoning out just a bit until we decide, if we decide to move forward with a new.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said. Is there anyone else?
because we really still, if we bought the other, one of these pieces of property that we're looking at today, we're still out 2 or 3, maybe
I
4
honestly think
years.
we're 4 years at the best.
Yeah, yeah, and to make those decisions now, I think it's something that we probably should, I agree with Ms. Darby.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Could I please remind the board, please don't raise your hand. Please call my name, because I'm going to miss you. One of these days, you're going to be mad at me. You just say, Spratton, Madam Chairman, then I will make sure that I see you.
Madam Chairman, my issue was.
Yes, Claire. Sorry.
Well,
Sorry, you're not the only one.
Ms.
We'll get
Bratton,
texts saying we can't hear.
Huh?
Yeah.
We get texts all the time saying we
We
don't.
can't hear, right, and we'll and I don't want to miss anybody. Yeah, I'm putting it on me. I just don't want to miss you when you want to say something. Ms. Rosales?
Yes, sorry. I see what the point is to delay the high school, but I think that's something more of a bigger question because we are getting those 3 additions that are coming, and there's going to be seats available. And so I think, I'm not one who loves rezoning because one, I have been in the neighborhood that has been rezoned more than once, and I know what that is like. But we do have an addition coming down the pipeline, and so I think that is something to bring into consideration of when to delay this, because right now we don't have a land for a high school. Also, we're not guaranteed to get a land for high school because we're still dependent upon funding from a different entity. We don't hold the purse strings. And so there's a lot with pushing things behind, delaying. So I think we just need to bring everything into the conversation, have a frank conversation about it, and maybe this is something we can do at the retreat.
That's the
good.
plan. I think it's a great idea to just.
Sounds good. Anyone else? Thank you. Number 11, engineering and construction.
So a request to change the Plainview Elementary building signage. Dr. Mark Gagne is requesting to replace the school logo signage on the front of the building. The cost for this project is estimated to be $6,080.81 to be funded from school funds. Engineering and construction has reviewed the request and recommends approval. So I talked to Dr. Gagne today, and apparently it was damaged during a storm. Is that right, Trey?
It was. It can, he wants to change the logo,
Okay.
and that's fine.
Okay.
It did blow off in a storm. It can be repaired and be replaced, but he wants it to be, or wanted it to be their logo.
Okay.
And we have no problem with that.
What about the difference between
That's pretty much the difference.
the difference between the price and us replacing it?
Yes.
Okay. Because they just right now have a metal sign like everybody else.
Well, this
that
is
correct?
going to be, it's still the same type of material, but instead of being a P, it's the smiling otter, it's their whole big logo.
Okay.
So it's a more expensive thing.
Okay.
I'm willing to chip in,
Whatever, yeah.
you know, what it would cost to replace the P and work with the school, but ultimately it's going to cost some money.
Okay. Anyone
And I
else?
will add that Dr. Gagne made this request. I talked to him today just to make sure he made it back in in October, because that's when, beginning of October when this was due. And obviously with changes, this is still supported by Ms. Sturm, the new principal.
Next.
All right, next we have possible land acquisition. So the board recently toured a property in North Rutherford County along Rocky Fork Road. At the October 12th board meeting, request was made on next steps regarding this property. Additionally, the board has been approached about a property on Stewart Creek Road. Mr. Lee is going to give an overview of anticipated site and development costs for both locations, and I want to give Trey an appreciation. I got to go way out of my comfort zone last week and meet with the road superintendent, and seeing somebody who, being in education and business, that's my background, and seeing people talk about things I've never heard of in my entire life and still not quite sure the words or the language that they used, but it was obvious they knew what they were talking about. So Mr. Reed was there as well, and I appreciate both of them kind of going through some of that. And I've asked him to kind of go over where we are and are looking at as part of our kind of land. And we have another one I think we're looking at as well that has been brought to us. So Trey, I'm going to turn it over to you so that I can try to connect with them, if that's okay.
All right, so we're going to look at 3 properties. One was brought to us last week early and sent to Mr. Reed, and I don't know whether the board got the information or not. So I added it in with this to muddy the water that much further. So there's 3 pieces of property, and there is no recommendation. What I'm providing tonight is information. And then for the board to then study, ask questions, and then come up with their own decisions or come back to me. So the first page in the slide is basically our county map. The gray line is the county line. The red is the city limits of Murfreesboro. The blue is Smyrna. The green is Laverne. Yellow in the bottom left corner is Eagleville. Basically, the 3 bright stars you see, the top left one that is near the blue, that is the property on Rocky Fork. The bottom, that one, Go back, John. That one is the Stewart Creek Road property, and the other is the last one that came in last week, which is a property right adjacent to 840 at Amoville Road on Ocala. Next page is basically just says the Haynes property, is to give us an idea. That's the property on Rocky Fork Road. It's 228 acres. Next page, what you see is the outline. The green is the property, all the property boundaries. Blue is city limits. The orange is the property. The red is the 2 gas lines that crisscross the property. And then you will see 3 purple T's. Those are intersections. The first one closest to the property is the intersection of Cooks Lane and Rocky Fork Road. That intersection would require improvement. In conversations with Mr. Brooks, it is in the city limits currently of Smyrna, so we would be discussing that with them. The next, going north, is the intersection of Lee Road and Cooks Lane. That intersection would also need improvement. And then the top one is Cooks Lane and Rock Springs Road, and that would also need improvement. So that's just basically where the property is, the easement and the road. I see a question?
Do you know, when I'm looking at this, to the right of that second gas line,
Mhm.
approximately how many acres are to the right of that?
There's no, but I can calculate it by Thursday night.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Question. The gas lines, I know that we had looked at that when we were out on tour. How much does that keep us from building near it? Is it what we thought? Is it 250 feet?
Yes.
So how much usable space is there going to be?
That's what I think Ms. Darby's driving at, and I'll provide that for you Thursday night.
Okay.
And if you like, I'll email it out tomorrow. I'll have it in the morning. I can email it to the board so that you all would have it earlier than Thursday, if that's what you would like.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Lee.
Okay. The next page is basically, there again, just the 2 pieces of property and the topography. As you saw, that's a beautiful piece of property, but it does have its challenges with the terrain. There are no creeks, per se, blue line creeks, as far as what is mapped by the state, but there is some wet weather feeder ditches that we would have to deal with. The next page shows the city.
Ray, what was the elevation gain from top to bottom? Because I know we looked
About
at that.
150 feet.
Yeah, I thought-
It's pretty steep. The next page is the city sewer. This was sent to me by the town of Smyrna. There is sewer access. That is a 16-inch main right across the street, so we would have access to sewer. Basically, the next page is just, there again, information. And the ranking, first of all, is in location to the Smyrna-Laverne area, where we're in the most need for a new high school that would alleviate the area. So the further we get away from that area, the less it would rank. Does that make sense to you? Because we're trying to work with Laverne and Smyrna area is where we're trying to land a piece of property. So this piece of property would rank number 1 based on the 3. After that, it's strictly information. There is adequate water available. There is sewer available. The topography is extensive. Our site cost would be well above average. It does have a feeder drainage. Roads, there's 3 intersections with Rocky Fork and Rock Springs that would need to be addressed. It does have access to major roads. It would be a multi-school site. And there are 2 gas line easements. This is basically just information about the piece of property.
Another question.
Yes, sir?
About the roads, you get the 3 different intersections that you pointed out on the previous slide.
I'm sorry?
The intersections you pointed out that
Yes,
needed
sir.
improvement on the previous slides, do you know what the cost is? Have you talked about what that?
The one would be very extensive. The one at Cook's Lane and Rocky Fork, there's a box culvert that would have to be addressed, and based on the state's new, and I did confirm this with Mr. Brooks this afternoon, the state does have a new law that any improvement to a roadway that affects an existing bridge or culvert has to be brought up to the current flood ratings, which would be very extensive for that area. Ditches are okay, but that is the creek, that box culvert does deal with Stewart Creek Branch. So we would have to work with FEMA on what those bridge improvements would look like. But I do not have an estimate of cost. Until a traffic study is done, exactly what we would have to do is, I know we would have to do something to those 3 intersections, but a traffic study would determine how much.
Madam.
At a minimum, there would be a dedicated left turn lane and decel lanes and turn lanes onto and off of, because right now, you can't make a left or a right turn out of those roads with a bus without being completely in the other lane of traffic. Yes, ma'am.
Darby?
When you send the acreage, can you include it for both sides of the street?
Yes.
I see the gas line running across the other one.
Sure. In other words, separate the sides of the street. Yes, ma'am.
Other questions on this?
Do we have any idea what they're asking for this?
They want us to make an offer, and Mr. Reed does have a number that they have told him that they have turned down.
Well, that's good to know.
I think that's given him probably a starting place, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Mr. Reed, would you like to share that?
We don't need to be talking numbers yet, so if we're interested in it, we can proceed and see where we get with the numbers.
Thank you. All right, next property.
Any other questions on this piece before I move forward? The next piece is 2418 Stewart's Creek Road, and I do have a typo. I do have an S. Stewart does not have an S.
Ooh, Mr.
So
That's your area, too. Man.
I'll
many
get
Stewarts running
caught with
around?
that one.
Yeah.
All right, so the first slide you see is the property with the roads. The roads are in red. What is shown with this particular drawing is from Burnt Knob to Baker Road. You can snake through the subdivision at the north to get to 1 Mile Lane. We don't like to look at, this would be our most direct route to get away from the school. There again, we met with Mr. Greg Brooks the other day. This road in places does have dedicated road right-of-way. In probably 40% of it, it does not. He thinks the road book mostly says 35 feet. These roads are not wide enough for 2 buses to pass. They currently have a bus going one way or the other. They don't have 2 buses meeting. So the roads are not wide enough for 2 buses. There's also a number of 90-degree turns that would need to be addressed. Fortunately, the one just north of the property is being addressed by that development that is currently underway. And if we were to purchase this, we would have the property to address the one that adjoins us. So there's 2 that we would not have to purchase additional land to make improvements to the roadway. Mr. Brooks is going to make improvements to Stewart Creek Road and Baker Road this winter, but it is so that his lowboys can make the turn. It is not to add additional turning lanes for dedicated lefts and rights, which we would be probably requested to make. So there is quite a bit of road improvements that would need to be done here. The next page is the topography for this property. It's fairly flat. I hate to use the term flat, but it's lightly sloping. It's a very nice piece of property from an elevation standpoint. The next page, there is not sewer available, but this is the soils map for the area. It does indicate, and we would not know till we tested it, but it does indicate that there is enough soils there to sustain either one high school or an elementary and a middle. We could not get 3 schools here, so it would either be 1 or 2. So if we look, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
This piece of property to the north, is that where the subdivision, can you go back 2
Yes,
seconds, please?
the new subdivision that's being developed, yes, all of that. There you go.
So where, between the orange and the red, all
Yes,
over
all of
is
that
the-
is a subdivision, yes.
That's a new subdivision?
Yes, ma'am.
And he has a step system that's coming in there.
They do have a step system for that property, yes.
Thank you, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Mr. Lee, I know you said we could possibly put an elementary and a middle school. If we pushed it, could we do a high school and a middle school?
I would say high school,
Elementary and middle.
elementary, but not high school, middle.
Jack and Jill? A different prototype?
What if, because they're going to share the same facilities as far as athletics, they're going to share.
No, they have playing fields and practice fields. So you would have 2 baseball, 2 softball. You would have 1 probably common football practice field, maybe. And I wouldn't want to regulate those 2 principals and those 2 coaches, personally. So the fields, it's still the same. Now, what you can do is have 1 soccer playing field that they can share. You would have another area for practice, because 1 would play and 1 would practice with soccer. So you could have a practice field and a playing field that they could share.
Is there any land adjacent to this area that perhaps we could purchase?
It has not been
Maybe
brought...
from the developer, or maybe,
There has not been any additional contact from anyone in the neighborhood about selling additional acreage.
but we could talk to them.
We can always talk to whoever we want to.
Because there's 3.
It's a
Ideally,
family,
we-
yeah.
They're right there, there's 3 of them.
Ma'am?
The 3, they're oddly shaped, they're not rectangular, but I think, is that right?
The parcels?
How much land would we need to do a middle school and a high school, which ideally in my mind is what we really need?
Based on that shape, about another 30 acres.
Okay.
I think, Claire, based on what I was told, those 3 long skinny ones on the front side, those 3, I think are somewhere around 10 acres each. I have no idea whether those families are interested in selling, but
Well, they also don't know that we're looking for a school.
probably not.
They do, because some of the neighbors are here tonight.
Well, there you go.
So if we went to, instead of the prototype that we have, that we go up and do the Jack and Jill, how many acres do we need?
I would stick with my same answer. We would need another 30 acres based on the shape of that property,
Regardless of what?
regardless of what we do.
Okay. so
Now, if
then-
you want to build a 12-story, very, a silo type school, then yes, we could do less. But I'm talking about something that would look comparable, but less of a footprint.
Total altogether?
Yeah, less of a footprint. I would still, based on that shape, need 30 more acres.
Okay. And of a total of
140?
140, okay.
For a middle and a high school or a 6-12 together.
Yes.
Because of the athletic fields adds.
Yes. Mhm. And that piece of property is long and narrow. It's not a box. Ideally, a box is perfect. But because of the shape and the fact that there's 2 or 3 houses, it's not much acreage, but there's a couple of cutouts in it. It does limit what you can and can't do. And we're going to have to chew up some of that front to fix the road. So we're going to lose some acreage with the road, and we're going to lose 15, if you want to put 2 schools on it, we're going to lose more acreage for the sewer system that we'll have to build.
But you're saying that if we do an elementary and a middle, that you would have enough for the step system?
Yes. And if we just did a high school, I think, and we'd know more once we test it. Still have to test it to verify that these soils that's actually there are as absorbent as they appear on this paper.
Anyone else?
So the next page,
I do
based
have a
on the
question.
three
I'm so
that we're
sorry.
discussing, this one would rank number 2. There is adequate water, and CUD is going to be upgrading those lines in the next 2 years. Sewer is build our own, says according to the maps, there is enough soils there, we think. The topography is good. Without testing, the site cost would be about average. It does have a feeder ditch and a pond, which is something we would have to deal with TDEC on. It's not a be-all, end-all, but we would have to do that. The roads, once again, very tough and narrow. There would be quite a bit of road work. Access is to smaller roads because Baker Road is not what I would consider a major thoroughfare. It does get a lot of traffic, but it's not one of our more improved county roads. One school, there again, one school could be 2 if we do elementary and middle or if we get a few more acreage. Easements, based on what we know now, without doing a title search, there are no easements on this piece of property.
Ms. Bratton, I have a question. What schools will this area relieve? If there was a high school?
The same, basically, it would be land that we would be looking at for the future. And I'm speaking for Dr. Sullivan, because the Beatty property, in theory, should take care of elementary and middle for a few years.
Right,
This property's in that same general area.
right.
A high school, it would be Smyrna,
Blackman,
or
Stewart's
Stewart's Creek, Blackman, maybe, and then you would have to shift Laverne. We would be looking at a completely different rezoning.
We would still need a Laverne.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Would still.
Yeah, I don't disagree, 100%.
This doesn't take
That's why I ranked the other, that's why I ranked the other one number 1. This property is a great piece of property, location-wise. Not encouraging buying 2 pieces for the future, I'm just saying it's a good location.
And then the Haynes property, what schools for high school will it relieve?
Let's get to that one and discuss it.
You talking about the first one?
That's the third one.
Haynes?
Oh, no,
No,
that's the first one. Gotcha.
That would be
Yeah, that's the
Laverne,
first one, the
Smyrna,
Haynes property.
Laverne, Smyrna, Stewart's Creek. That would be your
Yes.
big emphasis there.
Laverne, Smyrna, and Stewart's Creek.
Yes, and you would mostly pull from the Haynes property, you would pull from Laverne and Stewart's Creek, would be the majority of where you would pull your student.
And then you'd be able to bring the Blackman zone back closer to what it was originally because Stewart's Creek would move up. So everybody would be helped somewhat.
Because the first property is kind of where we need it with the Laverne, are they interested in letting us take some of it, or is it 283 acres or none?
Conversations to this point, and I'm speaking for Mr. Reed, it's been all or none.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
So you get, that's what we're doing right now. We're going through the pros and cons. I mean,
Yes,
obviously, you have
yes.
a lot of topography issues at the first property, but the location's good. You have much better property layout at this property, but the location isn't as pristine as the first property. So I mean,
Yes,
we're
sir.
just going to be balancing this stuff out.
Yes, that's exactly correct. And that's what I'm trying to do, is provide you guys with the information to make decisions on which way you want to go.
Any
Madam
other
Chair?
questions? Yes,
Yeah.
you want to
Something I would-
stop and do this?
No, something I would also like to add is, I don't know what our funding body would feel about it, but I do believe we've gotten behind in the past about not being aggressive with having land. One of our neighboring districts that was mentioned earlier today did a great job a couple decades ago about getting land, and now when they purchase and build schools, they already have the land. It may not be for this board or myself, but if we're looking out for the best of the district, this property sits in a great place 10 years from now. Where are we going to need schools and land? I think we'd all be naive if we thought this area is not going to be huge. So it's not where, and Ms. Sharp's right, this doesn't help Smyrna Laverne, where we need a high school. But long-term, it's in a really good spot where we're going to need something.
And if it would, and I'm speaking out of turn, but if a property like this was purchased knowing that it was going to be 6 to 7 years, it would give the county road folks time to make improvements over time versus being forced into doing it in 9 months because we're opening a school in August. That's something else that, I don't know that, it's a thought process for us.
I know the Stewart's Creek campus, my son was there numerous years, they still haven't updated that, and there's still two-lane roads.
Don't disagree,
around there.
Poplar Wood
So,
is still
yeah,
terrible.
It's still, yeah. They actually put a stop sign in at that 90-degree turn because of the. so-
Ms. Breton, I have another question. How much does it cost, how much do you think it will cost, an estimate in today's prices for high school? I know that's a funny question, but
Hold on.
I'm just curious.
I was afraid that question was coming, so I tried to be prepared. $180 million.
180 million.
That's just
And then how much is the?
Now, and that is based on the site work being probably $7.5 million.
7.5 million is the site work. And how much is the middle and elementary school? I know you gave this number, like, if one of them is 35 million.
What is the,
Elementary is probably going to be 60. That's what we're
Well,
we're
a new
estimating.
60 million.
total out the door, ready for students, $72,750,000. A new middle school out the door, $88,291,000. That's with today's prices based on what the new school at Wilson County bid last week.
And where our interest rates are right now, which is double where they were 2 years ago.
Yes, well, you know.
We're in the fours now, which is, I know is comparatively to the residential market, 4 is great, but when we were in the ones 2 years ago, 4 is rough.
Wow. So we're at 4 right now,
A
interest
little
rate?
bit over, yeah.
A little over
Metro
4.
Nashville got a deal then. They built that school in Bellevue for $124 million. Wow.
Want to hit that last Shores Road for us?
Yes, ma'am. The last one is the property that was sent out recently. It's Shores Road. We know what they're at. They gave us a price. They want $100,000 an acre. That's what they're asking. It's 89.5 acres. First slide is basically the property boundary. It's in 2 pieces. Blue is the roadways. Ocala has been upgraded. Shores has been a little bit, but there would still need to be some work on Amelville Road and just drew a blank. That's okay. But that's what blue is. That's the roadways. It does have one way out. Basically, you would be coming off Ocala, and we would be backed up at Amelville Road trying to get buses and cars out one place. Even though it shows 2, as close as they are together, it's going to be one road.
It reminds me very much of Wilson Central. So if you've driven down 840 and seen Wilson Central right off the interstate, that's what this reminds me of.
Yes. The next is the topography. There again, it's another piece that's fairly flat, but if you'll notice, it's got 3 or 4 ponds. I have a suspicion 1 or 2 of those may be a sinkhole. I haven't been on this property, but that would be my suspicion based on this topography map.
Pretty common for that area.
It is. It's very common. So there is the topography. The next area is soils, because we would have to do our own soil system. There is some soils there. I'm just not as confident in how much and how good. There again, it would be a test and see kind of thing. Of the 3, the next page, of the 3, it would rank 3rd. There is water. Sewer would be on us to build our own. The topography is fairly good. I'm going to say average site cost at this time. There is some feeder ditches and some ponds. Roads, limited. It does have access to 840 and then to 96 back and then towards Smyrna. school site, possibly one, maybe two, depending on the soils. If they're really good, which I don't think they're going to be, I think we're probably one school, unless we did an elementary and a middle, and the soils were pretty good. But we wouldn't know that till we tested. And there are no known easements on this piece of property.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this in a trust? Is this property in a trust? Is the
I
property-
do not believe it is.
Okay.
Now, the piece adjacent to it is. The next piece up Ocala, it is.
Because of this location, excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's number 3.
Yeah, this will only, this is in the Smyrna area. This will not alleviate Laverne.
I don't think so.
Because this is more the Blackman.
No, it's more Blackman.
More Blackman? Okay.
Yes.
It's way away from.
I didn't, yeah, when it said
It's at
840,
840.
I said, yeah, it's no way, nowhere near Laverne.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lee, do you have, or can we get, well, first question, do we have to do anything as far as the road improvements other than, I know you said in some cases we may have to purchase more land for those road improvements, but outside of that, is the school system responsible for any of the road?
All right, now, I'm fixing to open, this is a really, the answer
Yes
to
and
your
no.
question historically in the past is no. However, after Plainview, the county commission has made it very clear that they want any and all road improvements included in our budgets. Now, the numbers that we discuss do not have road improvements in them because we don't know what they are till the property is bought and a traffic study is done. At that point, we can determine what the road work is, and we did that at Beatty. We did that at Beatty. We did the traffic study, which allowed us to estimate what we thought that was going to be, and we think we should have that covered in our construction documents, or we will have it covered.
I guess my question, based off of that, is there any way to get some kind of, even just a guesstimate of the road work at one versus the road work at another, site work at one versus site work at another?
I would feel comfortable in generalities doing that tonight. The road work for number 1 probably would be in the $4 to $6 million range. That depends on how big a bridge T-Deck makes us build at Cooks Lane. I would say 4 to 6 million. Site work would be very extensive. I would say probably 8 to 9 million per school. And if we're looking at it as 3 schools, that would be times 3. The Stewart Creek property, road improvements, 8 to 10 million. Because it would have to be probably done over time, and it would be an inflation thing. But I would say 8 to 10 million.
Would that include the easement cost?
Yes. Site, 5 to 7 per school. So if we did a high school, 5 to 7 million. If it was an elementary and a middle, I would think maybe 9. It wouldn't double, but it would be somewhat more. The Ocala property, that's a wild card from a road standpoint. I would be scared to even guess what a traffic study would show there. And we would be dealing possibly with TDOT, because that is a state road.
And that's near the quarry as well, right?
Ma'am?
It's near the quarry?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
So that's pretty close. And Greg Brooks and I have talked about it quite a bit.
Ms. Shaw?
He basically told me whatever we paid for the land, double it and call it roads. But it's not quite that much. He was joking. Then he said they'd probably be close to the same.
Ms. Sharp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, I know in Laverne, there was a piece of property, the Ridge, that we were looking at, and they, in their zoning, whoever buys that piece of property is responsible for doing the roads, but it's not my knowledge that we are responsible for doing the roads. I know that there are times that we help pay for some of that, but that's why they have the road board, and that's why we have a road board, because the road board does the roads, the schools does the schools.
Do not disagree that historically has been the way it's been done. We do our road improvements, like turning lanes, intersection adjustments, things like that.
So have the county commissioners changed the zoning? Have they changed the law? Have they done a new policy that says that we have to do that?
I don't know that any of that is in zoning or policy or law. It's just the way they've always operated. And they have made that, it came out of budget, is where it came from. They're expecting those numbers to be, now, whether we pay for it or the road board pays for it, it's kind of the same money.
I understand
think.
the taxpayers are going to pay for it, but
Don't disagree.
as strapped as we are,
I agree. I'm relaying what was told to me.
we understand. I just got to ask the questions.
I understand.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Good discussion, folks. All right.
No, you're,
Somebody on the phone?
no, it's going to be Thursday. They already had
Okay,
another meeting, so we're going to do
okay.
it Thursday.
Yeah.
So, and then we'll talk about CMTA as well with this connected on Thursday.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And that's, there again, that's just for information for y'all's benefit to help you make decisions.
Okay. So Transition Academy?
Yes, so this was requested, and I agree completely. So to discuss, just to begin discussion, if it was something the board's interested in, there's no motion needed, but we currently are renting a property in Murfreesboro for the Transition Academy. We looked at the budget, how much we've paid over the years for that. We can probably either, or we can definitely build our own. I'd be interested in two potentially funding sources. So there's a couple different options. One, we can always look to see where we are within our 141 budget. We have a very healthy fund balance. I can tell you right now, though, the second that I bring this up to take out a fund balance, it's going to be brought up. This is that argument of shared versus unshared money. Even though this money's been sitting in fund balance and there's no way to tell which penny came from where, whether it came from state, who knows where the penny came from, we're going to get that argument of you were using shared money specifically for a high school, and this would be specifically high school perspective. So I definitely think it's something we need to do for our students, but also for being fiscally responsible to stop sending money to somewhere. And they've been a great partner, but we've outgrown that facility. Great partner, but.
Madam Chairman, this is something near and dear to my heart. I have advocated for 2 transition academies. The one that they have now, bless their heart, MTSU has been a good partner, but it's small. They can only take 12 kids over a 2-year span. But the things that they gain from going there, the confidence, I've saw kids that could barely talk that were karaokeing and being able to talk to us extensively, and they go on trips and they learn and they become the people that they're supposed to be after going to Transition Academy. It's wonderful. But the problem is it's too small. There's not enough room for other kids. And if we had 2 locations, if we had one in the north and one in the south, that's ideally, and we could take more than 12 kids, because it's just a wonderful, if we went last year, Ms. Rosales and I went to, and I saw some kids that had been former students of mine, and they had just grown immensely, emotionally, socially, in all aspects. And it is the most wonderful thing. But I have seen so many kids that go in there for their interview, because you're eligible once you turn 18, and they go in there in their interview and they knock it out of the park, and then they're told, I'm sorry, you can't go. And it's a space thing. It's not that they're not ready, it's a space thing. And so I think it would be great if we could find the money, and I will talk to the county commissioner with you if we need to, and let them know this is very, very important, because my own nephew didn't get to go there, and granted COVID hit, and so they just didn't send him back. And it wasn't right. I wish we could take more kids. I think each Transition Academy should have at least twice that number. And our county is exploding right now. Our special education numbers are exploding. And this is very, very necessary for these kids, young adults.
Ms. Bratton, I agree with Ms. Maxwell, and when we went, Ms. Maxwell and I went to the Transition Academy graduation, and we took a tour of the existing house of where they house all the kids, and this is something that they really spoke to about the need, that they've outgrown it, and we need to look into the future so that we can continue expanding this program. So I agree, and I'm curious to see if we've got land already. If there is an area where we could,
So Ms. Darby actually brought this back to us, so I appreciate her bringing it up. So 2 spots that we looked at, of course, it'd be up for the board to decide. We have land at Smyrna Middle School.
right, yep.
It is in the middle of a residential zone already, and this is a residential housing type setting. And then we do have land at Whitworth Buchanan that we're not going to be using for sports fields, hopefully, that is on one side that, even if we put a high school there eventually, I'm not sure it would be usable for us for that setting.
Yeah,
We've
that's
got
great.
land in different places.
Yeah, we've got land that we're not really doing anything, well, not that we're not doing anything with, but we just land that at our disposal that we can build something like this. And we don't have to go to the county commissioner to buy land, because we already got the land. It's just going to them, maybe possibly for moving the pennies out of one fund. Hopefully, that'll be the case.
Those are, Madam Chairwoman, those are actually 2 excellent locations.
We tried to look at where would be centralized locations for all the schools on the north and the south side. Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Madam Chair? Yes, ma'am. Question. Dr. Sullivan, you said you had calculated how much we'd spent. Do you recall that?
No, I don't, but I know it's over $1,500 a month, and it's been the last 12 years. It was, I knew we could have built a house when we discussed it last
100%,
time.
100%.
Probably 2 houses.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Sullivan, when we met, I didn't ask you about this, but I guess what would next steps be?
Yeah. Next steps would probably be for us to figure out where we want to put them, and have a formal motion on where we want to put them, and then be able to start going from there with the architect.
Can I ask, Madam Chair, that that be put on the agenda for the next set of meetings?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Get that done. Anyone else? Number 12, financial matters.
All right, so we have 2 Fund 141 budget amendments. Before we start, I do think it's important for us to be aware of this. So anytime the state is sending down money, this does impact our 141 fund. To the average citizen, it makes it look like we are getting even more money from the local tax base. So our current budget's $518 million. This is the first one, $2.3 million. It's going to now show $520.3 million. So of nothing of our own, we keep getting, rightfully so, we had a huge influx of state money, but you get told your budget keeps increasing and ballooning. Well, some of it is just the way that the state is sending money. This is 2 state grants that are going to be sent to us potentially, but it makes our budget go up because they're sending funding. So first one, Fund 141 budget amendments. This amendment increases budgeted Fund 141 revenue and expenditures to recognize the awarded amount of the state-funded fiscal year 23-24 public school security grant and the carryover amount of fiscal year 22-23 safe schools grant. These monies will be used to provide digital threat assessment training for SROs, active shooter training to school staff, the purchase of radios, repeaters, radio software, weapon detection system, bullet resistance film, cameras, portable lighting, and generators. Both grants total the amount of $2,361,940 and been approved by the State Department of Education. There is not a required local match for either grant. So we add that as just a reminder to our county commission, they're not required to match this.
Questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Sullivan, do we, I guess, next steps again on getting our teachers scheduled and set up for the defense systems training? Where are we at with that, or what are next steps?
First step is to accept the money. So that's our first step. But after that, it's to then reach out and see what their capabilities are for their first quote and all that type of thing. So we should be able to move fast once we officially accept the money.
Okay.
This will have to go through, it's a budget amendment, it has to go through Health and Ed, County Commission, all those different steps.
I just know that his calendar is like
Yes.
crazy, so, okay, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
depend on what the money is going to be spent on, is that something that the board is going to vote on, or?
You guys already did back in September. This is just now the money's finally been
Okay,
released.
but I had asked a question about a certain item, and I need
Yeah,
to
we'll talk
talk to
about
you.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyone else? Next.
All right, the next one's a big one. So this amendment increases budgeted Fund 141 revenue and expenditures to recognize the awarded amount of state-funded fiscal year 23-24 Innovative Schools Model Grant. This grant will be allocated to fund additional CTE positions at RCS high schools. It also provides other supplies, materials, equipment, and capital outlay for innovation and CTE programs of study at the high school and middle school levels. This grant is for the amount of $17 million. It has been approved by the State Department of Education. There is no required local match. And so a little background, in fiscal year 21, Governor Lee allocated several million dollars in state funds to go towards Innovative Schools Grant. We were one of those districts that were awarded that. The General Assembly this last year, I can't remember how many millions of dollars it was, but put back with Governor Lee as one of his State of the State speeches to continue to invest in innovative schools models, largely around CTE. Every high school and middle school was awarded money. So every high school is $1 million, middle school is $500,000, and then we were able to get some additional funding for some of our unique structures like 612 and K-12. So we've had a lot of discussion. I will tell you ultimately what our number one goal is: to build a CTE center on the north end. We are running into a little bit of logistical issues with cost. Same thing with, we've got some land, but before we utilize that land for a CTE center, I want to make sure we're not building a school building on it. So one of those we've talked about has been Smyrna Elementary School. Smyrna Elementary School's got enough site, we could put a smaller high school, and by smaller, I say 1,500 kid high school on. So I don't want to stick a CTE center there right now if that's something that we get to the county commission approval and they said, no, you're not buying any new land. So that would be our next option. We've also looked at the possibility to lease. We have a ready-made place to lease. The problem with us being able to lease, and that's in Smyrna off Mayfield Drive, the problem with being able to lease is that hits the county's debt ratio just like it would with us building a building. And so we'd be in just as good of shape for them to go and say, hey, we need $9 million to be able to lease. So we haven't gotten as far with that as we thought. We've had several different options. All of that, of course, would come before the board to approve, but this is kind of what we're looking at. Ultimately, the number one goal is to get a CTE center. We want to, but the north end has some of our lesser exposure to CTE programs, so we want to add those there. Dr. Chastain, if you don't mind, anything you want to add to that? A long road on this one.
Yeah, and we are kind of running against a deadline. We want to act as quickly as possible. So we would love this approval. And we have big plans on what to do with that money, and we have several contingency plans. So we're just waiting for the direction. And we are very fortunate in Rutherford County to have such great CTE programs. And this would certainly help make sure all of our schools and students have access to all of the wonderful programs that we can offer.
Have you reached out to any of the businesses in the area up there in Laverne that maybe could, like Bridgestone or any of those that could help us out? I mean, Nissan was such a great partner years and years ago with the Mechatronics program. But there are businesses up there that could really, it would be a publicity for them. It would be good PR for them to help us out and maybe help us with a warehouse or something we could convert. And
We can reach out and try. We've met with the Home Builders Association. We've met with lots of people, and that's actually where the first group came from as far as getting a lease on the property that we kind of hit a roadblock on.
The chamber has also been great, the industry councils. I mean, we have people lined up ready to do whatever is needed. I think the building gets a little more problematic on several ends, but they are offering and already organized on materials, supplies, trainers. I mean, they really have been very generous and are excited about us possibly having a center, but it's become more complex than I think we had originally imagined, since this is a great opportunity with this amount of money that we can allocate to that need.
I can never imagine and now I just think from the county commission with our needs, I could never imagine us saying, hey, we need $12 million for a CTE center, and them saying, okay, hit the tax rate for that. they're going to say, build one of your own schools instead, one of your traditional schools. So this is kind of that once in a couple decades opportunity that we have to be able to build it with not taxpayer funds.
But if I may, to me, that goes back to the reason that I was looking at the property next door to Smyrna High School, because there's a large piece of property there, because it would not be a zone school. So it would pull students from Stewart's Creek, from Laverne, from Smyrna. So, I mean, I think I think we need it up there, and there's a lot of industry that's up there. But Ms. Maxwell, to your point, Commissioner Davison has, before she was elected, she did a lot of stuff in Laverne, and there's a lot of companies, including Bridgestone Firestone, that could be more generous, but they're not. So those areas up there, all in that area, have been asked repeatedly for support, and they're just not.
Well, this will help their workforce. So,
Mr. Tidwell?
So basically, we're kind of in a similar spot as we are with everything. We have people and even vendors, it sounds like we just don't have space. So
Right.
this could solve the space problem. It's just a matter of picking out the location. But you said you're running into some headwinds. What does that look like?
So for us, the biggest headwind was we have to figure out what we're doing about land, because Smyrna Elementary School's we have land there. But again, I don't want to use that site if that's going to be where we have to put a high school, because even for any of these properties that we've discussed, that's going to have to hit probably the bond market. We have the potential to take that out of fund balance, but we're going to get into that same argument of if we were putting a high school on it, you're using shared money, which I think is unfortunate, and I'm not going to get into that political aspect of it. I feel like it's us doing our due diligence if we're using our own funding instead of asking for it. But I can see the other argument as well. But that's the number one. The second one is if we lease or rent, that is just like the county taking out a loan. And so the county has a certain threshold that they can't get as far as having on the bond, and if they hit that, then they lose their rating and increases go even higher.
One other complication to throw onto that is that we are on a timeline, so we have 2 years to spend this money, which is why the leasing option even got brought up. So that from our side, we have, like I said, we have contingency plans, but those plans would, if leasing's not an option, then that means we're building on some of the land we have, which is complicated, and then our final option is we're going to put that money back into the schools just to build out existing programs, but then we kind of run into the same the problems we have as we grow. How do we make sure all of those kind of flagship programs that kids have access to those? So we need to kind of act fast.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Dr. Sullivan, did you bring up as far as the land that we could potentially build? I know you said the north end, but I know the Siegel High School has land there as well.
We don't have any land.
No?
Eagle High School.
Because when we talked, you and I, Trayley, you were saying there was one of them had land where you could build an academy school for 9th grade over in Siegel.
Not at Siegel, no. At
Burn Middle.
Blackman
No, it wasn't.
Elementary. If you don't build an annex, you have property at Blackman Elementary, not
Okay.
Siegel.
All right.
Siegel, we would have land in middle school if you took the portables away, but we'd have nowhere to put the portables. Oh, no, it's not. It's
Oh,
on
you don't?
Wells.
'Cause
We
there's
don't
a
have that.
chiller sitting
Yep, it's
there.
chillers now. You're right.
That's why we can't add on to Siegel Middle.
Yep.
Okay, well, I misunderstood. I thought you said when we met, there was land out there in
Not at
the
Siegel.
Siegel area where you could build a 9th grade academy and then, all right, well, I misunderstood. But anyways, okay, never mind then.
Madam Chair.
Anyone else?
Yes. Back to leasing and renting. When I first came on the board, I talked about the Stones River Mall because there's a whole strip on that one side. I know it's not on the north end when you want it, but there's a large portion of that mall that's not going to be used.
We've talked to them as well, and their number was outrageous. But that's been a year, so we talked about them with Motlow. But we may be interested in talking to them again. Mayor Carr, Motlow's Brett, we all went on a tour with that one. So.
I'm not talking about that particular building.
Okay.
I'm talking about where the fountain is, where the Dillard's is, because they have that circle drive, and there's a fountain there, and they have several outside entrances to that
Yes.
strip. So it was basically, I forget what was there on the end, but it goes from the fountain where Dillard's is, but it goes from there all the way down to where Victoria's Secrets used to be. So that whole one side is empty. And then they had a parcel out there where they have like Halloween stuff over there as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
so as far as the timeline, he says 2 years for it. Do we have to be complete, or if the money is allocated?
Money has to be allocated, and usually give you about 2 months before it has to be spent. Like I know with ESSER, we have to have POs by June 30th and everything expended by September 30th. And so I'd have to go back and see the exact details of the grant. We would probably have to have POs, I know we'd have to have POs written for sure. But with the timeline, if we build with construction materials, we probably need to build soon if that's what we're going to need to do.
Yeah, so that was going to be my follow-up question is like, this needs to be rolling, we need to have plans already approved by April, or?
Probably, yeah, the latest.
Because this is a one-time grant.
Correct.
I mean, that's my, of course, we'd want to use the money rather than let it expire no matter what, but that's my fear with leasing is, if you can go ahead and get the portion covered on the building and you already own the building, then you're good.
We talked about a lease to buy with a 9-year lease, which is what the group wanted to do, was a 9-year lease that brought it to us, and we said, can we lease to buy with 9 years? So that's the term you want, but it's still, the lease would have hit the county's debt ratio.
Yes, sir.
I haven't really looked, but I can get, well, I did.
We
I
did
gave- I
look.
gave Brian some numbers, yeah.
But it's not all 17, because
Nope.
yeah.
Because some has to go to staffing at your schools that you wouldn't want to build the facility and not build some of the staffing into it. So that would eventually, it could, yeah, it could.
Probably be about the size of the maintenance building over here, about 25,000 feet. Yeah, a pre-engineered building would be a great use for that, like the maintenance building. We could design it, so that it just remove a sheet wall and a couple of girts and add on to it and keep going. But yeah, about 25,000 feet.
We don't know what you said, Mr. Lee. It sounds
sounds
great.
great.
It sounds great.
Sorry.
Remove all those you want, whatever you're doing.
Absolutely, for sure. Anyone else? Number 13, legal.
All right, number 13 is just for some board direction and just kind of some updates on 814 South Church Street design fees. So we talked about this last time. We're currently utilizing the requests for qualifications for architect services from 2021. The only architect from this approved RFQ that provided pricing is Goodwin Mills and Kaywood, which used to be Binkley Garcia. Is that correct, Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Yes. There's another one that is board approved as well that is
Fine Sweeney.
Klein Sweeney, that is not interested, or is interested, but it's 6 months out.
The county's got them pretty busy building all these centers
Public safety building.
on our property.
Yes, the public safety buildings. So in the last 2 weeks, RCS released a new RFQ as required for architects. A target date for board approval of the committee's recommended architects from this RFQ is December 7th. And truly, I do not care either way. I just want some direction. So you'll see there are 2 motions. One of them is to move forward with Goodwin, Mills, and Kaywood, and then they have the pricing. And then the second option is to wait until the target date is for December 9th for that to come before the board. Realistically, I'm not sure we get students in this building regardless of which way we go this school year. And that's probably being optimistic, even saying there's any chance we get students into this building. Yeah, Trey's being less optimistic. I'd be shocked. You have to send it to architect fees. We're going to work with the city. We're going to have to work with the state fire marshal. Then you're going to hit right in the middle of, if everything works perfectly, we could design everything the way we wanted, building done to a T. You're hitting March or April, and that is right in the middle of testing season for us. And we're not going to move students in the middle of testing. That's just not something that would make any sense for us to do. So both of those options are the board. I just wanted to get direction on where the board would like for me and our staff to head.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes, ma'am.
If we, by opening up the RFQ, how many, or Trey Lee, you may actually know this, how many different architectural firms do you think will be interested?
There's no telling.
I'm going to say 8 to 10. And then the committee would narrow it down to probably 3.
Okay.
And that comes for the board to approve.
And then those 3 would come before the board.
And then just like, so we're kind of tag teaming that, but when we looked for the Beatty Elementary, that allows you then to talk pricing with all of those. And so like with Beatty Elementary, he asked, what are your fees for each one? And we were able to get the one we were working with because we used a current design for, was it 3%? Is that what we did?
Yeah, 3.5.
Yep, 3.5, and one was 4.5, so we recommended the lowest one. But having a couple that you're able to work with gives you some options.
Well, 8 to 10, even narrowed down to 3, is a whole lot better than 1.
We had more last time, we just recommended 2.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So regardless, if we were to wait until December to let these bids come in, I mean, we're not going to be up against a wall to get this done before the beginning of next school year, right?
I don't think so.
Because I
Now,
know
if you're
initially,
telling me you're not going to make a decision until January, I'd say yes. But if if we can make it December and December, I can have it by August.
Okay.
yeah, because I don't want to just see it just continually keep getting pushed back.
I would need a decision in December so that I could cut somebody loose by Christmas. Sorry.
Nice
You're right.
Christmas present.
Enter into a contract by January 1.
And with architects, each one that we do is separate. So this is one project, the next project has its own architect. Every group is different every time we do a project.
When we put it out to bid, can we put any wording in there that says, hey, we're looking to get this moving so that we don't get trapped into some type of holdup where this architect firm, whichever one we choose, they're like, oh yeah, we'll get to you in a couple
This RFQ's already
months.
gone out.
And it's not, so when you do an RFQ, it's not for bid. So the architects are different because they're a professional service. So they say they're qualified and then we talk to them about pricing. It is a little
Actually,
bit
you
opposite.
select them and then you get
Then
to
you
talk
get to talk
about
to them about
You
pricing,
can't talk about pricing till you've selected them.
which is why we like to have a couple.
Makes sense.
But once we've selected them, then I can ask them, what's their price? And if I get 2 different ones, I can choose between the 2. That's typically why we wanted 2 last time. Probably do 3 this time. Just so we've got multiple options.
I mean, I'm thinking there's probably not going to be a major difference in the pricing. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm just worried more so about the timeline. I don't want to see, I mean, because we talked about this school possibly opening up in January, which is completely gone. And then
First it was
now,
August.
if we start moving the bid process back or whatnot, and then now we're looking, well, we can't open in August, now we can't open until next, I don't want to see that happen. That's just putting more stress for the reasons that we're developing this building into an alternative school. It's just continuing the problem that we already have.
Ms. Darby?
Just so that I want to make sure I understand, pretty much opening it all this school year is off the table at this point.
Correct.
Okay. And either option, you're anticipating us being able to open at the start of the 24-25 school year.
As long as I have an approval by Christmas so that I can enter into a contract by January 1st. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
Anyone else? Number 14, resolutions.
So the first part of the resolution was signed and mailed to each of our state representatives and senators on October 11th, 2023. So lockdown training for substitute teachers. There's currently no requirement for substitute teachers to have lockdown and school security training. Most of our schools will have some number of substitute teachers on a daily basis. Enhanced school security for substitute teachers to have lockdown and school security training. So we moved this to this board's work session and meeting so that we could discuss. So you'll see the changes are, and I'm going to read this one even though we're not voting. Require all substitute teachers in the Rutherford County school system to obtain lockdown school security training by March 15th, 2024. The reason for that date is that I'm going to have to move some money around out of our sub line item, and we'll do that at the middle of the year budget amendments to be able to cover some of that, because we will have to pay people for this, and that all new substitute teachers receive such training within 60 days of start date with the sub vendor. So I would love to try to get it done beforehand, and that's going to be the goal, is to get it before they start. But in the meantime, the other reason that's a little bit vague is that we'll probably release another RFP for sub-vendors around this time. So right now, that's not in their contract, and so we would want to add that into our request for proposals as well.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sullivan, for doing this. I will say that thank you to the board again for signing the resolution. My understanding is that it's getting full support from the whole entire Rutherford County delegation, so that's amazing. So there's likelihood of that going to General Assembly next winter, so in January, so that's great. So I just want to say thank you so much for doing that.
Anyone else? Next.
Mr. Reed, do you have a copy of the resolution to read for this one? I do. And so if you don't mind coming up while I read it as well. So great idea by Ms. Sharp, brought this forward. So students, teachers, and staff are frequently victims of students who make false bomb threats or other threats against the school. Such threats are disruptive to schools and distressing to students and staff. Many of the punishments for such actions are not sufficient deterrents to some students. The revocation of a student's driver's license may be a more effective deterrent for some students. The attached resolution is proposed for the legislature to consider adopting laws allowing the revocation of a driver's license for individuals who make threats against schools.
I'll read the proposed resolution. This is a resolution supporting the enactment of state laws to suspend the driver's licenses of students who make online threats intended to disrupt public schools. And this says, whereas the safety and well-being of students, educators, and school staff are of utmost importance to the state and local boards of education, whereas threats against schools and students are on the rise, with many of these threats being posted online on various social media platforms, and whereas these threats are often false claims intended to cause fear and lead to the disruption of regular school activities, and whereas a stronger deterrent is needed against those individuals who make such threats, and whereas driving is a privilege, not a right, and the state has a responsibility to ensure that those with a driver's license act responsibly in all areas of their lives, and whereas there is a need for more substantial consequences for students who threaten the safety of their peers, educators, and school staff online to underscore the seriousness of their actions and deter future threats, now therefore be it resolved by the Rutherford County Board of Education that the board, number one, urges the Tennessee State Legislature to pass legislation allowing for the suspension of a driver's license for any student who is determined to have made threats or posted threats against schools, students, or staff. Number two, the board recognizes that the suspension period should be determined by the severity and frequency of the threats and should also take into account any prior offenses. 3, the board believes that upon completion of the suspension period, individuals whose driver's licenses have been suspended should be required to demonstrate an understanding of the consequences of their actions on their peers and the community before the license is reinstated. And 4th, the board urges the Tennessee State Legislature to collaborate with school districts, law enforcement agencies, and community organizations to ensure the effective implementation of this suggested legislation. So that's the resolution you'll be presented with Thursday.
Questions or comments? Ms. Sharp?
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Nobody reads a resolution like you can.
I agree completely.
So Representative Robert Stevens and I have been working on this for some time, and he already has this queued up, and he has some other legislation that he's working on that's a little bit more severe penalty-wise. You know, they'll have to work that through, but I'm supportive of this because, you know, all the time we get texts, the board members get texts, and everybody is just like, okay, it's another day. And we know sometimes that these threats are unfounded, but we can't take that risk. So every situation is followed through, even though we realize that it probably is a hoax. And, you know, there's some students that want to get out of class and don't want to have a test or something like that. And I truly believe if there is something with a little bit more teeth in it legislatively, that it will deter some from doing that. Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Yes, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to see this expanded, that if you're 13 or 14, You're not getting your license when you turn 16, that you have to wait till you're 18.
Well, they are talking about making it a felony.
That would have some real teeth.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, and that's,
That's
and
the
I,
whole
you know, I
shark,
wanna
isn't
see-
it? Yeah.
I don't want to see any,
just teeth, the whole shark.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ms. Darby?
Ms. Sharp, do you know, I think it was number 3, where it said they have to demonstrate their understanding and how you're anticipating them doing that?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to talk to Robert Stevens about that, so
Okay.
he can include that.
curious.
That was not included, but I think it is something that's imperative that we do, that they recognize what they have done and how much harm and how much money it costs and learning loss that it costs.
I was just curious whether it was like they're going to have to write something or whether they're wanting them to.
We're going to have them
Just
come read a resolution.
A 1-hour presentation to the board each.
Yes.
An essay, and I'll grade it.
Uh-oh, I'm out.
Just kidding. Any other questions or concerns? Number 15?
All right, so number 15, I did a poor job of where I placed this on the agenda, so I'm sorry, Ms. Turnbow. Trying to lead with curriculum and instruction, and I put it at the end, so that's my fault. We talked about special education last time, so making sure the curriculum stays a focus and our students and teachers and instruction stays a focus. So Ms. Turnbow, our ESL coordinator, is here tonight to give us an update from the first quarter regarding our ESL numbers, staffing, projected future growth, a little bit of everything.
Plug it back in, all right. Well, you just said that it's a punishment to have to present to the board, so it's part of so I'm not sure if
Yeah, really
asking me to do this was a punishment or just to inform you. But yeah, my name's Megan Turnbow. I've been your ESL coordinator for about 3.5 months now, and just a few things to talk about. I won't take a lot of your time, but numbers, that's a big thing we're talking about all the time right now is our ESL numbers and how they're growing. Just giving you a quick understanding of how we're held accountable for our English learners, how we're funded, and just some concerns that we're seeing right now. But before I do that, while I have the microphone, because I never know when I'll have it again, I want to brag on a couple of people that have just been really supportive to me in these last 3.5 months. One is my ESL team. We have 7 people in the ESL district office staff, and me coming on has increased their workload significantly because I move at a really fast pace and they're having to move that way too, and they've just jumped right in and are doing so much more than they ever have. And like I said, there's 7, they're probably doing the work of 12 people right now, and I appreciate everything they're doing and supporting me. And Mr. Runyon, he's not here tonight, but there's been several things that have come up where it's like, this really needs to happen for our schools, and somehow he's found the money to get it done. An example is having all of our translators come in the week before school started to help with enrollment. Enrollment, we're going to talk about that more when I get to concerns, is a huge issue for our ESL students because of the language barrier. And to be honest, enrollment is hard for all of our parents. I don't know if you're a parent. I have 2 children that go to Rockville Elementary, and I know when it's time for enrollment, I have to set aside about 1.5 hours to sit down and upload all the things, and I know what I'm doing. So enrollment is an issue, and Mr. Runyon found some money for us, and he's done that several times. Dr. Gulliam is my immediate supervisor, and he handles all the details and has just been great with showing me everything that needs to be done to run a federal program. And then Dr. Chastain, she is the energy behind ESL right now. She truly is. And it's one of her priorities. And every time I'm with her, I walk away like, yes, we can do this. We can get it done. And then, of course, Dr. Sullivan, he trusts all of us to get it done. And working for somebody like him really just inspires you every day to be better. And so I just wanted to take a second. I know it's late, but you just don't realize how many good people are working here at our central office, and I just wanted to brag on them while I had the opportunity. All right, so numbers. These are our numbers as of Friday. You can see direct serve. Those are the students that are receiving ESL support. Like they leave their classroom and go to the ESL teacher. Waived students are students that could be getting ESL support, but for some reason their parents have signed off that they don't want them to have that. Then that transitional years, it's each year after they exit the ESL program. Now, these are the ones that we focus on when we're looking at our ESL teacher to student ratio, and where I got that 7,388, and it's a 1 to 35 ratio when we're talking teachers and students. And you can see, I wish this wasn't different, but this was Friday's number, 7,388. Right after fall break, I made this, and you can see how it was 7,190. So just within like 2 to 3 weeks, we jumped. And I'm not good at making graphs, so I wasn't going to make another one. But you can see the point here of 196% rate of growth since 2014. And then you can see how the numbers jumped in just a few weeks, and we're constantly growing. This gives you a little bit about our languages. Now, while we're talking about ESL students, we also have a group that maybe don't receive ESL services, but in some way or another, they speak another language at home. 28% of the students in Rutherford County schools speak another language at home. So that includes students who didn't qualify for ESL services, they had enough language, students who are in ESL right now, students who have tested out. So you can see and it's not just located in one area of the county anymore, it's everywhere. We are growing at every single school. And then 12% of Rutherford County students are actively an English learner, meaning they receive services some way every day. We have actually 103 languages, and only 65% of our students speak Spanish. That was a surprising statistic to me when I took this job, because you always think ESL, Spanish, but that's only 65% of our kids.
That first bullet of 28%, that equates to just over 14,000 students don't have English as a background. I mean, that's, yep.
Well, and all the reason why we just need more supports, and that's what I'm here for. One support that comes out of the general fund is a data system called Elevation. And I'll go there really quick. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but our teachers, our admin, our counselors have really bought into using this platform, and I use it every day. So you can see some active numbers here as of today. Like we get the question, how many newcomers do we have? There it is.
In the newcomer definition?
12 months or less in the country. And then you can see like how many per grade we have. If I had more time in it, I would show you more of this. Like long-term learners or students that have been, these LTELs, been in for 7 or more years, so we're really putting a focus on trying to remove some barriers to let them exit, test out, have more language. And then this is our circle of languages, so all the 103 here. But I just wanted to show you that something that our general funds purchase that we are using every single day. Now, school accountability, you see 10% of every school score comes from their ELPA and the English Language Proficiency Assessment. The ELPA that Tennessee chooses is WIDA. So if you hear WIDA test, that's our test that measures their English language proficiency. Do I need to exit out? Oh, okay. And now this may change with the way that the state's trying to determine report card things, but right now all of our schools are judged by that test that our English learners take once a year by 10% of their score.
And that test is not, it is part of TCAP because TCAP's the huge umbrella. We think of TCAP usually as just the test the kids take in either November, December for high school, or everybody takes in the spring, but it also includes WIDA. And WIDA is a separate test that our English language learners take in February and March to see what their language acquisition is. It's not standards connected. It's truly, I mean, it is, needs to be, but it is truly their language acquisition.
And really it's 4 tests, reading, writing, speaking, listening. And he said February, March. For some of our schools, it takes all of February and all of March to test all of their students over those 4 tests. Talking about funding, general funds, and then we have a Title III funds. General funds, now TISA. You can see the model here, and based on their category, how many years they've been in the ESL program, they get additional funding, and that pretty much goes to our teacher positions. Our ESL EAs come out of the general fund, which is different from SPED EAs, which has a separate separate, they have federal funding for that. Our translation services, and then Elevation, the data system that I showed you. And then the other source of funding for ESL is Title III. And this is what we're using it for right now. Curriculum, for 7,000 plus students, a $15 workbook costs a lot. Some of our positions, we fund 2 of our district translators and 2 of our district instructional coaches through Title III funds. We do a lot of professional development, and sometimes we'll pay for substitutes that comes out of that. ESL parent English classes, we've got some classes in the Murfreesboro and Smyrna area that we are funding to help our parents. ESL night school, we currently have 25 students at Smyrna High doing a night school to catch up on credit so they can graduate. Teacher stipends for training, we pay for a lot of our own technology in Title III, printers, ink, document cameras, smart boards, those type of things. And we go through this Title III funding very quickly, but it is helpful because the general funds go quick too. Some concerns we have.
And Title III is federal, so when
Yes.
you hear the Fed, this is one that would have to be made up, so that is federal. Do you know what our Title III budget was roughly this year?
Well, we got about $650,000, and we had some carryover too, but it started at $650,000. So budget, big concern right now is positions, and just to be fully transparent, right now we have 192 ESL teaching positions in the district, but going back to that number I showed you at the very beginning, we should have 207. So we're short 15 teaching positions right now, and that's nothing against, no one's done anything wrong, because honestly, when we started the school year, we were like, we're good, we're caught up. But the way we've been growing by like 100 to 50 to 100 students per week, we have not been able to keep up. So I know you approved 10 additional positions back at the beginning of September. We're short already. I've been doing school meetings. I've finished my last school meeting today, and I've met with almost every school in the district. And I would say 90% of them tell me I need more EAs. I'll give you an example. Today at Smyrna High, they have 2 ESL EAs and 10 SPED EAs, but it's different funding. They have more ESL students than they have SPED students, but the EA numbers are off in a lot of places.
And I'll hit on that because that is not a budgeted expense. So the state does not give you a guideline of that you have to have any EAs for English as a second language. So anything we do is strictly on general purpose funds.
Let's just say thank you for what we do have. But if you want to know what the schools are asking for more of, they are asking for more ESL, EAs, and translators. They're using them for a lot of support in the general education classroom because honestly, our ESL teachers are so stretched thin teaching the English language development classes they're required to do. They can't get out and support the teachers, which really goes into the next point. I hope to have a few more teacher support positions specifically to support our general education teachers who have English learners in their room. ESL teachers are trained. They chose this job. And so it's not a big deal when the numbers go up for them as much as it is our general education teachers who were not trained to be ESL teachers. And a lot of the, I don't want to say panic, but just the concerns and the emails, I feel like is coming from our content, our grade level teacher. And right now, those 7 people I talked about are very split and stretched thin, trying to support everybody we can. So I may ask for some more support in that area in the future. And then growth. I mean, space, when I say we're short 15 teachers, we don't have 15 classrooms in this district. We don't have 15 closets to turn into classrooms anymore in this district. I've been in a school where we've done that. Everybody is trying their best. So even if you gave me 15 positions tonight, it would be finding a place for those teachers to go. Again, personnel, and then enrollment centers. That is something we've been talking about, and it goes with ESL, and it's kind of come up through ESL because it's so difficult to enroll students. But we've been talking about enrollment centers, and Jessica Johnson wanted to jump in tonight because we were talking this week. I talked to her because a lot of our English learners also qualify for Atlas. And she was very, very excited and said, if I can show some support to enrollment centers and having a streamlined consistent process for enrolling in our district, she wanted to be a part of that. So I'll give her a second.
Hey, good afternoon or evening. Again, I'm Jessica Johnson. I'm the Atlas program. I'm your homeless education coordinator. So today, 1,120 students in the Atlas program. We are growing every day. I do not have the specific number, and I apologize, of ESL students in our Atlas program, but I do want to talk about what a enrollment center or multiple enrollment centers, if that could happen, could do for us. Our job is to eliminate barriers for our students, and we know that education and a child getting a diploma is going to hopefully end the cycle of poverty for our students, and that is my goal, and I'm sure as educators and supportive educators, it's your goal. So by having enrollment centers, this is going to be specifically trained individuals that can enroll our kids the same way, the consistent way, and they are going to be able to identify needs immediately. So if you can identify my kiddos, my homeless students, that means you're not walking into school empty-handed. I know about you. You're going to have your school supplies. You're not going to be starting school empty-handed. You're not going to stick out. I'm going to know if you need clothing. I'm going to know if you need school transportation so we can start working on that. We're going to know if you need food that weekend. So it sounds like simple, small things, but if the Atlas program knows about that 2 weeks before school starts instead of 2 weeks after, we can meet those needs so much faster. And I feel like personally, that's what the enrollment center can do just for 1,120 kids. So that's the reason I came by tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then our grading just concerns English learners touch a lot of tests. They count in a lot of subgroups, and not when we're talking about TCAP and EOCs, TN Ready, and then with the WIDA test. So Dr. Sullivan wanted to talk a little bit about how they affect our A through F grading for each school and for our district.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of conversation in the next couple weeks. With the release of the state report card is supposed to be the release of our new accountability system, which will retroactively go back to whatever we did last year, not knowing that this system existed, but that's how it's going to be put in place. Regardless of what happens with that, let's say that ELPA was taken off, so you no longer have that 10%, because that's been part of the conversation, honestly, is that that is not going to be part of it. Our students, for achievement purposes, may lack English language acquisition, so they don't know the English language, but our schools are still going to be held accountable for that subgroup of how they perform on English language arts, which is a concern if that's how some of your scores, what your letter grade is going to be. So you're going to have students from a state level who, for their language acquisition, no longer have to show proficiency to gain language, but you are going to then hold them accountable for learning English in a language that is not their own. And so that's a concern. It is a concern because you're going to have some inequities in just honestly what your school demographic is. Our schools on the south side and the west side, honestly, are schools that have lower rates of poverty. So your 10, 20, 30% rates of poverty, they're going to perform very well on the proposed A through F grading system. Our schools on the north end that have our very large, high ESL population are not going to perform well because they have students who don't master the English or have not mastered the English language. And so that is a concern. I think the initial was, we'll just take ELPA away and you don't have to worry about that. Well, those students, our students are still going to take regular TCAP. And so you may have removed one barrier, but the biggest barrier probably the system became worse because at least we were getting credit for the growth they were making. And so just as we talk about that in the next couple weeks, I've yet to see a draft, but just through conversations, when it gets released, we'll have some conversations around what does this impact us. But I'm extremely concerned over what I hear with just a push on achievement over what it does to some of our most at-risk students. So thank you for letting me have a little bit of a soapbox.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Sullivan, your predecessor, and I spoke about this many times because I think it puts our teachers at a disadvantage that they're graded on how the students pass. And my solution to this was to give a longer moratorium than the year that they have. Because when I spoke to teachers, they're telling me, and y'all can tell me different, it's 3 to 5 years before they're proficient and that they can speak English.
Elementary level.
That they comprehend and that they can pass tests, and that it's not, this is harming our system and harming our students when it's, and our teachers, when it's not something that they have any control over whatsoever. So I think we need to get back in front of our legislators and say, hey, this is something that we should be able to do.
I think it's an unintended consequence because, again, most of the state, and you have to realize that most of the state, this doesn't apply to them. We're not a very, I mean, it's a growing ESL population, but it's not a large growing population. When you look at our percentage, we have a much higher percentage, and I've mentioned it before, than Knox County Schools does. Even though there are 10,000 students, we have more than us. We have a much higher ESL population than they do.
And it could go back to the caveat that we had spoke about when Chairman White was here, thank you, about harming this, but if we meet certain goals or certain requirements, that we're not harmed by that. So it could go back.
Great point.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I will encourage everyone on the board to listen to the Tennessee School Board of Education special call meeting that was held on October 11th, because it spoke specifically about this, the A through F grading system. It had on the call the commissioner, Lisette Reynolds, on there, kind of saying why there's a recommendation of this A through F grading policy, and basically just with her and her colleague speaking why the current system that we have in place is not the appropriate one. Something that we need to understand is that the Tennessee School Board of Education, this is not a system that is up for a vote. This is something that the Department of Education is strictly implementing. So the concerns here, since, like Ms. Sharp said, since there's some serious concerns about how this has been handled, it has to go through the legislators, and really we need to get into their ears and for them to understand what the repercussions are. I will say that in that 2-hour meeting, I did not really hear, and I could be wrong, and maybe I missed it, I did not really hear a conversation around the special populations in regards to English as a second language. So, so that is an input that is not being raised right. That's not a concern that is being raised right now, at least in that conversation. Granted, that was just one conversation. They're going to be having multiple conversations, I believe, with the Tennessee State Board of Education. I believe there's going to be a total of 3 conversations that the commissioner and the Tennessee State Board is going to be having. But right now, they're just gathering the input from the comment section, and they're kind of talking through that. So I just encourage everyone to see that school board meeting.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
I had a couple questions. I don't know if this is for Ms. Turnbow or if Dr. Sullivan can answer these. But how many open ESL positions do we have currently? And are those positions, if we were to create new ESL positions, knowing we needed the space and other items, are those hard to fill positions? Do we have people that?
So when you gave us the others, in September, I made a master list of everybody that applied. I'll tell you, some schools had 0 apply, some schools had 4. So, for example, Christiana Middle had 4 apply. I'm waiting for them to finalize the one they're going to pick. And then I thought about contacting the other 3 and saying, hey, nobody applied here. Are you interested? And kind of spreading that out. Right now is a hard time to hire people. I think it'll be easier if we were to get more to post them with maybe a hiring date in January. At the semester is always easier to hire.
Yeah, because you hit right now,
Congratulations.
The only people that you have out there is somebody that may have moved or somebody who is still looking for a job that we probably don't want, quite honestly. And then the other,
Or some of our principals got creative. For example, Oakland Middle got a second position. They basically doubled from the spring their numbers. And they took a social studies teacher that had been interested in being an ESL teacher, hired their own social studies teacher for that ESL position, knowing they could hire a social studies teacher much easier.
Yep.
So there's some, games that can be played to move things around for people. We have lots of people interested in being ESL certified within our district. I get an email probably once a week from teachers asking, how can I become ESL certified?
Ms. Turnbow's also working on an opportunity to have some free ways for our people to get an endorsement as well.
I had a university contact me, and we met last Monday about free endorsements, because it's ESL is one of those things where you can't just go take a praxis and be certified. You have to take 4 additional courses and take a praxis. So it costs money to be certified in ESL. It's not just one test.
And already be a certified teacher. Or be working
You already
towards
have
it.
to be a
Yeah.
certified teacher and then take 4 additional courses. So
University I like, Miss Maxwell. We'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Zing?
and it would be great free courses that cost a lot of money usually. So.
Oh, yes, $1,700 a course. Wow, that's a lot. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
We need every one of those positions. We should have those case, then the state should be funding money, or the federal government, whoever's going to pass these laws out to us. So just keep that back in mind.
I'm sure that made me think of a question here. On the TISA formula, is there extra money involved for?
We get, so Ms. Turnbow had that on, we get quite a bit of extra funding, but it's strictly to use to fund teachers, because if you're getting $4,000 roughly for a kid that's English as a second language in that tier, it'd be tier 1, right? 4,000 roughly.
I think the tier 3 is the higher one.
Okay, whichever tier it is, so you're looking to have 35 kids that are going to earn that money, so that's roughly going to cover 1 or 2 teaching positions, but you also have to cover all the extra costs that come along with educating those students as well. So it's not covering a teacher in an EA. And
It's not paying for itself.
and I hate to say, Ms. Turnbow, when she asks me for EAs, I usually say no, because I'm like, we get enough funding and I have to use it to fund a teacher. I'm sorry, I have to hit a teacher ratio. There's not an EA ratio. The EA ratio is 7,000 to 0. You're not required to have one of them, but I am required to have 1 to 35.
Can I ask what the requirements are for an ESL EA? Do they just,
The same as an EA.
just regulars?
Now,
Okay.
some of our ESL EAs are bilingual because we use them as translators, but it's not a requirement.
It's not a
Just like our
requirement, okay.
ESL teachers are not required to speak another language because we have 103 languages. How could one person speak 103 languages? But our ESL EAs can be English only, but we do need some of them to be translators.
Madam Chair, just a follow-up question on that. As far as the funding goes, maybe that's something we could look at as a board, adding up what that cost is and showing the legislators, hey, this is a new funding formula. You guys are willing to adapt as to what the costs are. So this was the allocated amount, but it's not really covering that. So maybe they would be interested in bumping, and they're going to make changes.
Yes.
So why not make that part of the change? Maybe that's a resolution we should be looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we don't have a ratio, but one ratio I've been thinking about is 1 to 70 for EAs, and basically that would come out to 1 EA for every 2 ESL teachers. And we have some schools that have 0 ESL EAs, and so when you have a family come in that doesn't speak English, they have no one to call upon, or I'll give you, where was it, Wills? Where'd you go? Walter Hill. Walter Hill said they have to pull their PE teacher. They were there 100 years. It's Dr. Sullivan's school. That was all mentioned in my school meeting. But they have to, when they have a family come in that speaks Spanish, they have to go pull their PE teacher, who's the only bilingual person in the building. And so that's just hurting other classes because they don't have the staff to be able to have a translator there.
Ms. Bratton, Dr. Sullivan, with the structure, I know in corporations, as an advantageous, as part of recruitment, individuals that are bilingual, there's an incentive there to pay a little bit extra. Is that something that's already padded into our pay scale?
No, it's not.
Is there anything against the law that will prevent from that?
We have a signing bonus if they are ESL certified.
But not
And a
being
sign bonus?
For ESL, but not being bilingual.
Okay, is there something that we can look into creatively to add as an incentive? If you come in the school and you're fluent, meaning you can speak, write, and talk, to have that incentive for an EA, as an EA, specifically for ESL.
You can do anything with a budget. Just gotta find the money.
And it's a skill that they have.
Exactly.
You don't.
Yeah.
You know, so if you were paid $1 or $2 more per hour.
Yeah.
Because you have that skill.
I think that'd be advantageous, because I know when I've been in the city school, I've been in the substituting, I have been tapping into it, because I've got kids that do not understand a single word that is being said in English, and so I'm having to, right there on the spot, having to say one thing in English and then say something else in Spanish, but I am requiring the student to repeat back at least something in English so they can start understanding the language. So there's times where you will need to pull that out in order to communicate with the child so that child can engage and interact. So if there's something that we can do for next year's budget, that we can make that accommodation and give a little bit more incentive for speaking a second language, whether it be Spanish or Arabic or one of those that have been identified, I think that'd be awesome, amazing, and we can see some good results out of that.
Just accountability.
All right, so this is
Thank you,
just,
Megan.
yeah, great job, Megan. Just for information, so as part of TISA, Tennessee Code Annotated 49.3.112, requires each school district starting in 23-24 to submit an annual accountability report to the Tennessee Department of Education. This report must include goals for student achievement and an explanation of how the district's stated goals can be met with the district's budget. Each district's TISA accountability report is required to be presented to the public for review and comment before the report is submitted to the department, so the report must be submitted annually to the department by November 1st. Furthermore, each district's TISA accountability report is required to be reviewed annually by the TISA Progress Review Board pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 49.3.114 to determine whether the school district is taking the proper steps to achieve their stated goals. So a couple things here. One, we have to show that our funding went to address teachers, learning loss, and addressing just academics in whole. So we're going towards raises, going towards salary with teachers, going towards curriculum with our huge textbook adoption. That absolutely helps. The other part of that is that we have to show how we are doing with the proficiency level, specifically with third grade reading, correct? How we are meeting you want to hit on the threshold because you and Mark have done an amazing job on this. Shocking.
Late, Dr. Sullivan. We have got to get 70% of our students scoring proficient on the third grade ELA TCAP by 2030. So then there are incremental goals of how we will get them to that threshold. Things may change between now and 2030, but we have 6 years to get to 70%. Reminder, we are right there around 45% this year, to give you an expectation.
In 2006, we were well over that, and then the standards and the state testing has changed. So when you hear percentages, they truly are whatever the state decides. Each state makes their own percentages. We were in the 90s and 100s back in the early and late 2000s.
And all of this will be posted on our website tomorrow, so it will be up for the next couple weeks. And then we will submit it to the state on November 1st. So this is kind of just a baseline year, and then we'll start having to add the evidence for how we are spending money to reach these goals. So it's pretty specific in terms of the action steps to get us to these 5 main goals.
Questions or comments? Number 16.
Anything, Dr. Anthony?
Shout out to Ms. Couples and her team. Open enrollment has ended. So they're working on some finalizations for all the different platforms that they have to have everything entered. So we're really excited about many of them being able to make the changes that they wish, or our first time with passive enrollment where they can continue with whatever they signed up with.
did a great job. She made bugged was the wrong word. She made sure I did mine as well, so I appreciate that.
Number 17,
Nothing tonight.
18,
Same, I'll do it Thursday.
okay.
Ms. Rosales had to step out temporarily to take an emergency, and she has nothing to report for tonight, so.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell, you're lovely. General discussion?
So
Yes, ma'am.
we have a birthday?
I think we do. But she doesn't want to acknowledge it. What should we do?
Claire, I already started backwards, so you can start counting backwards, so you can start that whenever you want to.
I get to be 55 all over again.
Oh, Miss Maxwell has a birthday on Friday, so everyone please be sure to tell her happy birthday. And for the board, our Anna has done it again and made us a cake. So we get a cake. I don't know that. No.
Please stay and have cake.
Yeah, please stay and have cake. Anyone else?
I just want to thank everybody. I know tonight was long, but a lot of good, important conversations need to be discussed, so thank you, guys.
Ms. Darby?
Move to adjourn.
Ms. Maxwell?
Second.
We are adjourned.